I sometimes hear people say that Ukraine and Russia were close to a peace deal in spring 2022, but Ukraine rejected it. And this, in their view, is why the full-scale war drags on for a third year. Well, this is one of the favorite lies promoted by Russia and its sympathizers. A closer look at the facts demonstrates that the whole story does not hold water. And it will take me under 4 minutes to prove it. But first, ask yourself, why is Russia promoting this story? The answer is easy. By focusing the public on the Istanbul talks, Russians try to shift the blame for the war in the middle of Europe from themselves, the aggressor, to Ukraine, the attacked country. They want people to forget that it was Russia that started the full-scale war in February 2022 and instead focus on the talks at the end of March 2022. By shifting the focus, they are trying to tell everyone, see, Russia actually wanted peace, it was Ukraine that rejected it. Absurd. If Russia wanted peace, it should never have attacked Ukraine in the first place. Yes, it is true that Ukrainian and Russian delegations have met since the early days of the invasion. They indeed discussed ways to end it. But the positions were so far away and Russian demands were so bizarre that the prospect of a real solution was not even remotely in sight. The draft documents leaked in the press simply reflect that discussion, but cannot be considered a real deal. Every diplomat knows nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. And it is very certain that nothing was agreed in March or April 2022. The idea of Russian and Ukrainian presidents holding talks was indeed discussed, but Russia rejected it. Other people sometimes say that the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson came to Kiev and pressed President Zelensky not to make a peace deal with Russia. This is a very funny story. First, anyone who has ever met President Zelensky knows that he is not the person who can be pressured into any decision. Second, because the process of talks between delegations actually continued throughout April and even May, well beyond Johnson's visit. It doesn't really match this story, does it? So who actually ruined the prospect of peace? Was it Boris Johnson or Volodymyr Zelensky? No. This person's name is Putin. He has been ruining peace in Ukraine for more than a decade. First, by occupying Crimea and parts of the Donbas in 2014. Then, by obstructing the Minsk and Normandy peace processes. Then, by launching full-scale aggression. And then, by refusing to end it. This is why the war drags on. Only together can we stop Russia and put an end to its aggressive plans for the rest of Europe. For this to happen, keep supporting Ukraine and don't buy Russian lies.
That was Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba talking about the supposed mythical peace deal that the Russians like to talk so much about, the one that never actually existed. As he said, until there's ink and signatures on the paper, there's no peace deal. So that's at least one starting point on that. I know that there will be plenty of people who will claim that there is so much other things going on right there, that it was confirmed by a bunch of other people. Not really. It was basically in the process there. But again, there was no peace deal, and it wasn't torpedoed by foreign powers. This is just a batch of propaganda pieces put together by the Kremlin. So keep that in mind. I'm sure they've mentioned, in fact, he mentioned there was negotiations ongoing for months upon months at the start of the war. So a lot of things going on, and it's best to pay attention to the things that matter, and that is how things are right now. By the way, I'm Brian Lusk. Thank you for joining me today. Glad to have you here. Let's go ahead and get right into things. I already see Lucille and Jerry joining, so glad to see you both here. Appreciate it. I do apologize for being late. You'll note there's no tie, and I'm kind of not in my best shirt right here. It's because I literally ran in the door and fired things up. Because I had a meeting that ran just a touch long. So I do apologize for that, and I apologize for the tardiness of the stream, but I want you to know that I appreciate you being here anyway. So let's go ahead and dive on into this. First bit of information that's come through on the desk here is a train derailment in the Volgograd region. Now, initially, I said to myself, well, there's no direct evidence that this is related to the war. Well, let me tell you, more has come out. Now, you can see that some of this stuff is like scrap metal. You can see logs and wood, and you can see damaged train cars. You can see signs of fire, especially right here, fuel tanks, burned wood and equipment. And this indicates that there was an extensive fire involved with this derailment as well. What I didn't see is direct, like exploded train tracks, but that would have been before this point anyway. So no way to tell exactly how it was taken out. However, there's been some interesting stuff come out since then. Russia claimed that it was due to sabotage, and the saying that somebody had blown up the rails or the cars or somehow sabotaged the train itself. The Ukrainian state, however, it was done by drone. So interesting comparison there. Might be interesting to see. Volgograd is not that far from from Ukraine as far as that goes. On top of that, there was some additional details that came out on top of that. Just tons of different perspectives. Let me see if I can find it now. There's some great stuff here. It is interesting that today's event with the derailment of a tank train near Volgograd, and by tank they mean like fuel tank, took place not far from the arsenal of the main missile and artillery directorate of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. They've got some archived footage, archived news articles and things like that about the large-scale construction of warehouses in Volgograd. Now, I'm kind of curious where exactly Volgograd is, so let's go ahead and pull up Google Maps here. Volgograd, Russia. Now, let's see, where is this located? Well, here's Ukraine. I can see Luhansk right here, and that would make this, let's see, measure distance to Ukraine's border be 222 miles, and to the rough closest point of the front line, somewhere right in here-ish, about 300 miles, or I guess that'd probably be about 480 kilometers. That should give you an idea of if it was drone, if it really was a drone, it was a well-timed, well-placed, and well-executed drone attack. And that's the scoop on this train. Now, the train did have fuel tankers on it, so that could have been a strike at that. It could have been intending to perhaps damage the nearby missile and artillery directorate arsenal. Bunch of possible targets were associated with this, but either way, that's an effective destruction of a train and taking those particular tracks out for at least enough time to clear off all the debris and fix up any of the damaged rails. That might also include those that may have been damaged by fire, where it may have been, in fact, rendered softened or too hard by fire, and therefore brittle or destroyed. So lots of aspects there. Let's go ahead and pop over to I guess I only got one item out of Ukraine itself today. The research today was really interesting. Most of the big stuff is about Kharkiv and everything going on over there, and we'll get to that when we get to the front lines. But the big news out of Ukraine is that they're from 2100 to midnight, emergency blackouts are introduced in all regions of Ukraine. That is due to a significant shortage of electricity in the system as a result of Russian shelling and an increase in consumption due to the cold weather. Now, he does mention cold weather, and I've got a bookmark here somewhere. Let's see if I've still got it. Ukraine weather map. There we go. Let's see. Temperatures are not that cold, but it does look wet across much of Ukraine, and therefore that could be the real issue, is between the wet and the slightly below normal temperatures. So that could explain the commentary about the colder weather. It does say the lows are in the 38s and 40s Fahrenheit. It would get kind of cool at night. But overall, that does indicate that there may be some blackouts that need to be done to keep them operational over there. Yes, things are with the meeting and everything else going on. Things are a little bit going a little bit on the fly today, so bear with me as we get everything going. Good thing I'm really fast on that their mute button. Okay, let's move on to the news out of Russia itself. We got quite a bit more going on out of Russia. A lot of it is related to the switch ups of leadership over there. Igor Korenishnikov, the Russian Ministry of Defense spokesperson, has reportedly resigned. He was the Baghdad Bob of the Russian Ministry of Defense, if you remember from back in the Iraqi war days. In Novosibirsk, I'm going to let that one go. Yep. Chuvashia region in Russia, a fire broke out at the Kimprom plant. That is a chemical industry plant that produces over 200 different products. So that would be vital to their war effort, one amongst many other facilities. Did not report precisely what happened. However, the plant's press service stated that the fire occurred during hot work to repair a cable overpass, with the fire extinguished with no casualties, according to them. Now, the British Ministry of Defense, though, has been throwing a little bit of shade on Russia, especially lately. In this case, they're talking about their Prestige T-14 Armata tank, the same tank that actually broke down during its initial inaugural parade on the Russian Victory Day parade. And this is they've only got one or a few of these T-14 Armadas. It's not a high production number tank. The Russians have confirmed that it has entered service, but it will not be joining the front lines in Ukraine. And this is likely due to the potential prestige loss of having this premier Russian vehicle that's supposed to be all that and a bag of chips plus some extras on the side. And they don't want to have the visual of seeing that lost in Ukraine. You see, when there's a U.S. M1 Abrams that's lost in Ukraine, it's not even the latest model. It's not like we've got our own boys with their most modern equipment and tanks over there. We got the older ones, the ones that have been downrated in armor. They still got the 120 millimeter gun, but they're not. They don't have the latest equipment and thermal vision and things like sensors and things like that. So it's no prestige loss for us if an M1 Abrams is taken out on the battlefield. But for Russia, with their T-14 Armata, with so few of them, and how much they've talked it up, to lose it on the battlefield would be a huge blow to their prestige. Okay, we mentioned some of the shakeups in the leadership here. I think I've got this scattered over the next 12.5 tabs here. So bear with me as we kind of sort through and find these things on the fly. Putin has appointed Nikolai Patrushev as his assistant. He was the secretary of the Security Council, which is now being held by Shoigu. Now, the fact that he has been appointed as an assistant to Vladimir Putin could have a variety of meanings. There's a bunch of speculation going out there. It would indicate that he isn't necessarily falling out of favor, per se. That doesn't mean he's necessarily happy to be in his position. We don't know. Just understand that he has not been removed entirely and sent out to pasture or thrown out a window. The Kiev Post posts that the United States states that that all these shakeups indicate that Putin's war is getting desperate for Putin. And I could see that. It's clear that one of the things he's discovered is that he's not getting good, accurate information from his leadership, hence the need for the shakeup. And he might be hoping to get something better out of his staff by shaking things up. That said, the fact that he feels he has to means that the war is not going as well as he might have hoped, and he's starting to see that there are real long-standing issues. The new defense minister, I mentioned this the other day, is an economist by trade. He has all about basically the money and the integration with technology, and that is what he is working on. He wants to further integrate the economy and the military together so that the economy is producing the war materiel that they need to prosecute this war. On the other hand, not everybody is getting a happily ever after out of this shakeup. Russian Defense Ministry personnel chief has been detained on criminal charges, though they have not, as of this point, revealed the charges. Now, he could be, number one, he's likely on the take, so there's probably corruption charges there. But as we all know, in Russia, if you are officially approved to have corruption going on in your name, then you are on the good side. And the only time they bring those charges is when you've done something really to put you on Putin's bad side. So what did he do that resulted in his personal attention being paid by Vladimir Putin to shake him right out of the Ministry of Defense? Don't know. We'll be watching that one to see if anything else comes of it. Russians dropped 2 more aerial bombs on the Belgorod region. That's including in the field near the village of Varvarovka. And this was, again, an abnormal drop, as they say. They do, I believe, report that the bombs actually didn't explode as part of these drops, but, take your pick as to which one you're going to believe on that. There's several others have blown up over the time, so keep that in mind. The new Belousov here, Andrei Belousov, has stated that every ruble of budget money should go towards the effectiveness of the Russian army. Now, understand something about Russia's budget here. When the Soviet Union fell, my recollection is that it fell about the time when their defense spending skyrocketed above 7.5% of their budget. And they're already working over around 6.5% is my recollection. And he's saying that every bit of in fact, let me rephrase it. I believe it was 7.5% of their GDP. One of those numbers is correct. I don't remember which one. But this is they are literally spinning themselves into oblivion at this point in time. They don't have the economy to back this up. They'll gradually be finding that they're going to have to make do with less and less capable equipment, as they will be prevented from getting Western equipment. The only possible bright side would be China, and I will discuss China and what's going on with it from the United States late in today's video. A resident of Novosibirsk was sentenced to 12 years in prison for attempting to set fire to a freight train. 48-year-old Dmitry Gurlev was found guilty of collaboration with a foreign organization, sabotage and preparation for it, as well as manufacturing explosives. This could be a partisan, could be a lot of things, but they allegedly found chemical laboratories for production of explosives, rags with manufactured explosive on them, and precursors and explosives. So they believe he may have been in correspondence with the Freedom of Russia Legion. The main reason I point this out is because it's clear that there is shall we say, a market for people who are opposed to Vladimir Putin and opposed to the imperialism that the Russians have been carrying out lately. Let's see, moving on. This is just mentioning the 2 men who have become Vladimir Putin's assistants. Keep on moving. This one's a weird story right here. 3 Russian servicemen were found dead in a hostel in Simferopol. They believe they were poisoned by drugs, but there was no signs of forced entry, no signs of violence, they didn't all have bullets in them or anything like that. However, they did find indications of injections into their hands, and there were syringes and packages with unknown substances nearby. Is this a poisoning being carried out by, say, partisan actors? Simferopol is in Crimea, after all. Or is it a bad batch of drugs and the three men were shooting it up and discovered the hard way that not all drugs come exactly 100% pure? We have no way of knowing it at this point in time, but interesting to think about. We mentioned the train that caught fire that was attacked. We mentioned a few other things. Well, there's also a chemical plant. With now, there's also a large fire occurring at a military unit. The unit number 44885 in the Zerzinsky district of Volgograd. They immediately declared that it's not related to a drone attack. Pretty suspiciously specific denial. But they don't tell us anything else other than the fire has been addressed, and that is it. I'm going to point this one out from Crimean Wind, and I'm going to state straight up right now, I don't understand the full ramifications of this, because the arbitration court of the Yaroslavl region of Russia, that's the Russian Yaroslavl region, arrested, or I guess confiscated might be a better word, the assets of PJSC Yaroslavl shipbuilding plant, which produces boats and tugs for the Russian Navy. I have not quite figured out why they needed to. Now, the articles and information have been vague on this one, and that's the reason why I'm sitting here kind of puzzling my head over it. This could be just a straight up nationalization of these assets. They could have said, okay, look, we want to be able to produce 3,400 ton ships. You guys are not doing it as fast as we like, or you might be too much on the take, or take your pick. But they basically took all of the assets of this shipbuilding company. But it was already a Russian shipbuilding company, so why? I don't know. It should result in no change, but it's interesting to watch. This little bit from Crimean Wind is also interesting because I've not seen any recent reports of attacks on minesweeper vessels. This is a picture you can just barely see there. Let me see if I can zoom that in for you. Of a minesweeper being brought into Sevastopol Bay using tugs instead of under its own power. This is a Project 266 minesweeper, Aquamarine class, but there are 4 ships in the Black Sea Fleet that could all look like this vessel, so they don't know which one it is. There was another one of this class that was destroyed back in 2022, but no recent reports of attacks on minesweepers that I have seen anywhere else. The fact that the ship is coming in under tow would indicate possibly a machinery or an engine failure or other situation that resulted in the ship not being able to come in under its own power. But it could also have been attacked and they lost power that way. I don't know, but it's interesting to see it happening. This is part of the road from Crimea to the Kherson region being repaired and resurfaced. They say that they've almost completed one section of the road, more than 10 kilometers long. The idea is to repair 8 sections for a total of 63 kilometers of road. Now, this doesn't look like it's a full-on expansion, though it does look like they have been working on the shoulders of the road, assuming this picture is, in fact, of that circumstance. They could be working on an expansion to allow it to, or at least repairing the road, to give faster movement to military hardware to Kherson, or vice versa, supplies from Kherson and obviously the rest of Russia into Crimea. In Moscow, an electrical substation was set on fire, and this was used by a plant producing military equipment, as well as security systems, alarm systems, and special communications equipment. So, interesting to see. They don't report why it was on fire or how it caught on fire. I've got an awful lot of things where there's just not that much detail about because it's coming in before all the details are getting out there as well. Already talked about this earlier. This is a bit of propaganda from the Russians. Russian TV is bragging that residents of Russian-occupied Mariupol are getting new apartments in newly constructed high-rise buildings. But the part they don't say out loud is that the residents are saying, no, 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 no. It's not Ukrainians, the people who live in Mariupol, that are getting these apartments. These are for people who arrive from Russia to live here and replace us. Now, I got to stop saying this is. Anton Herashchenko shares information that comes from Anders Nielsen, who is a Danish military expert, talking about the constant threat of nuclear attack that Russia uses to try and get their way. Russian nuclear threats escalated once more as American aid package to Ukraine was approved, and the UK greenlighted the use of long-range weapons on facilities in Russia, and talks of deploying European troops to Ukraine began. This is their typical pattern. As soon as they see something they don't like, they start threatening everybody and their dog with nukes. And Anders states that it's quite difficult to see how Russia using a nuclear bomb will actually lead to Russian victory. It's actually much easier to see how it can lead to defeat if Putin takes this step, for two reasons. The domestic situation inside Russia. If Putin uses a nuclear bomb in Ukraine, then he'll have to explain to the people that he has taken the country into nuclear war, and that there is now at least a potentiality that other nuclear powers might retaliate directly against Russia, despite the messages on Russian TV that things are going pretty well in the so-called special military operation. In other words, they'd be caught up in their own lies of saying that everything's going peachy keen and rosy in the special military operation. Foreign policy. If Russia uses nuclear weapons in Ukraine and it leads to a positive outcome for them, then there's going to be a whole range of countries that will start building nuclear bombs. As a result, we're going to see nuclear powers like China and India using their economic and diplomatic influence to make sure that Russia is absolutely isolated in the world in order to prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Understand why. You see, China doesn't march on countries that have nuclear weapons. They don't want the people that they march on to have nuclear weapons. In fact, if they do, it's a deterrent for them from them actually doing so. In that same vein, other countries are going to say, look, if this works for Russia, I want them to, because otherwise I have no real protection. The U.S. isn't coming to help. So, says Anders, when they talk about using nuclear weapons, then it's something they do to try to scare the West into not helping Ukraine as much as it otherwise would have done. This is a genie in the bottle situation. Once you let the genie out of the bottle, all the havoc's going to break loose because you will not be able to stuff it back in. As I said, or the other one is the cat out of the bag. Getting the cat back into the bag is impossible because you've already let the cat out, and the cat's going to fight you the whole way back in. And there's the problem. Nuclear weapons are the ultimate threat. But once you use them, you've now opened yourself up, and the world will rise up against you. And they will make sure you are not able to use a nuclear weapon ever again. And it will be a total nuclear war if they have to. There will be no holds barred because they will have shown that they cannot be trusted with nuclear weapons on the world stage. Not that we should trust them now, but once you use it, it's made it clear that you can't be trusted, and the rest of the world will stop you. At least in my opinion. Let's go ahead and move on to the international news real quick. The French defense minister says he will send a new batch of Aster surface-to-air missiles to Ukraine. That's helpful. They can use all the SAM missiles that they can get their hands on. Secretary Blinken is over in Kyiv right now. Actually, I think he might have already left the country at this point, but he made a brief visit to Ukraine itself and stopped in Kyiv to make some statements, do some partying, and overall do some reassuring. During a briefing in Kyiv, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken emphasized the critical nature of the current stage of the conflict for Ukraine. He pledged ongoing support, stating that the coming months would require significant effort from Ukraine. He also announced the U.S. commitment to providing additional air defense systems and promised further assistance arriving on the battlefield in the coming days. He also says he hopes that his visit, which by the way was not scheduled, will send a strong signal of reassurance to the Ukrainians, who are obviously in a very difficult moment. Still, he took the time to go and jump on the stage in a local bar or speakeasy or whatever they call it over there right now, and played on stage with the band a song by the name of Rockin' in the Free World, which, by the way, is very bad optics, especially for those of us in the West. Definitely not the work of a diplomat, if you really think about that. They do state, Blinken does state that they intend to conclude a 10-year security agreement with Ukraine. No details on what that will entail. Of course, President Zelensky stated that they needed at least 2 additional Patriot systems to just deal with Kharkiv, at least in the short term. And Blinken, for his part, committed to bringing Ukraine closer to NATO and facilitating its entry into the alliance. Interesting side note about Blinken's visit, and he's visiting with Kuleba here. The first time that they met, I believe they went to a local McDonald's. This time they went to Veterano Pizza. This is not just, as I said, an ordinary pizzeria. It was opened by a war veteran who volunteered to defend Ukraine back in 2014. So this is giving a little bit back to the nation by this particular visit. He also gave a speech at the Kiev Polytechnic University, recalling that the topic of this speech was the strategic success of Ukraine. There's a lot of strategic successes that Ukraine is pulling off. And finally ended off with what Putin destroyed, Russia should and must pay to rebuild, while he works with G7 countries to unlock billions of dollars and send a powerful message to Putin that time is not on his side. And that's Secretary Blinken's visit to Kiev. In my opinion, there were several aspects of that were not good optics, but overall, at least they're talking about the situation, and it's a step in the supposed right direction. Thing is, though, while I was off going to my meeting and stuff like that, I did bump into a post on Twitter/X. It says update from Kharkiv, and he specifically mentions Blinken's visit. No one expects timely delivery of sufficient Western aid. This is from Ukraine Reporter. The goes under the handle at State of Ukraine. Says no one expects timely delivery of sufficient Western aid, and Blinken's visit to Kiev barely registers as anything more than the usual grandstanding Team Biden theatrics. Those fighting and those helping them are only focused on what can be done now with meager resources. So there are concerns there, and he does give a full update on Kharkiv and the situation out there. I may be touching back on this later. But for now, yeah, that's the situation. Let's go ahead and move on to Poland. States that they cannot hand over a Patriot air defense system because they don't have it. They're receiving just now the first elements that were ordered 7 years ago. Sounds like somebody needs to kick their production into high gear. U.S. President Biden has signed a law that bans the import of Russian enriched uranium while unlocking $2.72 billion to boost the U.S. domestic uranium industry. The fact that we are even importing Russian uranium should scare the pants off of everybody, because that would indicate that our own uranium industry is not capable of providing that as it is right now. Now, they're going to have to invest, and they're going to have to invest fast to bring up that uranium and start getting it properly refined. But either way, this is too late in coming. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State for Political Affairs, Victoria Nuland, stated that Ukraine will receive new long-range weapons already this summer. She did not specify exactly what these weapons were, And there's been no further details. Vague. Now, let's pop over to the UK for a moment or two, and I wanted to share this video with you.
Today marks a brand new golden era in British shipbuilding because in shipyards like this up and down the country, 28 new ships and submarines are under construction or order. Ships like this Type 26 frigate behind me here, or the hunter-killer submarines elsewhere, or our dreadnoughts, which will carry our nuclear deterrent for many years to come. And today, I can announce up to 6 new ships for our Royal Marine Commandos, which are going to ensure that they continue to operate for the foreseeable future. But all of this wouldn't be possible without the additional £75 billion that this government has put into defence. Today marks...
Now, what does this really say? The fact is that Britain has always had to be a naval power if they're going to project their own power and influence anywhere in the world. Their tiny island nation would support nothing less. A navy is vital to Britain's power. And this tells me that they are taking seriously the fact that they're going to have to deliver in a new world where war is going to be more common. They are expanding their naval presence, their naval capabilities, and they will have to continue to expand if they're going to meet the rising threats, as he says, to the freedom of navigation and to the wars that are coming in the world. Now, he did also announce that all future Royal Navy frigates will be fitted with land attack capabilities, shore bombardment capabilities, effectively. This is taking the place of battleships and cruisers that used to fulfill that role back in World War II. And in fact, even up till the Gulf War, when the last Iowa-class battleship was in active service, its main purpose was providing that shore bombardment and land attack capability. Though by that point in time, I believe they'd already outfitted the ship with cruise missile launchers. So this role and this idea of land attack with your naval assets is returning into vogue. And you don't need that if you're not going to be at war across the world. Germany has declared they'll provide an additional military assistance of 7 billion euros. No word on exactly what that is, although they did declare they will transfer a third Patriot air defense system to the armed forces of Ukraine. On top of that, the UK put out a statement stating that they would not force Ukraine to accept a bad peace treaty. Now, this comes up mainly because like yesterday, I mentioned it, that Donald Trump, a Trump-affiliated organization, who definitely doesn't necessarily speak for Donald Trump himself, put out what looked like a peace plan, effectively, or at least a policy plan associated with what they thought Donald Trump would do. So the UK is saying that, no, we're not going to force Ukraine to accept a bad peace treaty, which looked to be part of what Donald Trump was proposing as well. So we will see how all that shakes out, but the UK may not be on board if it's a bad deal. We also mentioned the other day that Estonia had started forwarding the idea of sending the country's troops to Ukraine and to handle non-combat roles. They've walked that back, saying that there's been no specific discussions on sending the country's troops to Ukraine. Now, if they did, or if any other nation did, it would kind of break the impasse on providing that level of assistance to Ukraine. But in the meantime, that's not, they're saying they're going to keep kind of basically playing the politics of the conversation. According to Kyiv Independent, China-based companies pour a range of items from drones to microchips and machine parts into Russia, including products made in China and those that bypass Western export controls via Chinese entities. This could tell you how a lot of Russia's sanctions bypassing is happening right through China, which I will also discuss later on today. Then there is the fact that we're being told to pull our troops out of Niger or Niger, depending on how you want to pronounce it today, And this article basically came down to this statement right here. We have seen what the U.S. will do to defend its allies because we have seen Ukraine and Israel. This explains why the current prime minister, who came into power in a coup, is expelling the U.S. military from his country. Abandoning our allies like Ukraine has destroyed America's credibility. And that's the long story short. This is the full article here. I'm going to go ahead and drop a link into the comments here so that you can take a look at that whenever you'd like. And of course, if the computer would cooperate with me, it'll be even better. But there you go. This is the full article. It talks about it quite extensively, and it's not a short article, but it definitely shows that America's prevarication on the world stage has resulted in America no longer being welcome on parts of the world stage. Now, some people will say, well, fine, good. We didn't want them anyway. You'll want them when nuclear weapons are flying our direction because we're no longer strong and guaranteeing the world. But we'll see that as it goes. And that's the international part right there. Let's go ahead and move on to the situation on the front lines. I'll briefly touch on the things that are going on in Kharkiv right now. But there's a lot more information on Kharkiv coming. The enemy advanced near Vovchansk, which will be discussing extensively. Here's Vovchansk itself. You can see what that looks like by just stepping it back a day, basically capturing of open territory. Oh, we've got an update on 5.14. So they have updated since I initially looked at the map. So let me refresh and get you the latest. Okay, looks like they tried to swing around this side and they've widened the gray zone over here on the east of Vovchansk. Back up to yesterday again. In Hlybok, right here, also part of this section in Kharkiv. Yahidne, which is not in the Kharkiv region. This is actually over on the east side. A small advance outside of Kislivka. Literally a small advance, though, not a big one. South of Pervomaisk, Krasnohorivka. I'm just going to quickly check on these because they're all teeny tiny changes. We're not talking a block. We're not talking like a kilometer. We're talking a couple of houses. Small changes on all of these areas. The most interesting one is this one near Verbova, where there's a step into the open territory. But again, not a huge change. But a lot of little changes is still a problem. Let's go ahead and move forward to the 14th here. The enemy advanced near Vovchansk. We already dealt with that one. Near Kalinivka. Let me back that up and pop that. Here we go. The map has given me some fits. That's over near Bakhmut, as you can see, north of Chasiv Yar. They're still active in that area. And they updated Krasnohorivka. So it actually indicates that the Russians did not capture as much territory as was originally reported in Krasnohorivka. That's the map changes. We will probably come back to this when we discuss various things as we go. Here is Orikhiv in the Zaporizhia Oblast, just 9 kilometers from the front lines. And due to frequent shelling, the streets of the city have emptied and are covered with craters and debris from munitions. Quickly click through these pictures so you can kind of see the situation that people, even 9 kilometers from the front lines, poor cat, are having to deal with. And this guy's having to patch his roof back together. Supernova Plus is reporting that this is the likely place of the contact line in Robotyne itself, indicating that perhaps Ukrainian forces have lost a few houses, such as they are, because they're all wrecked ruins on the south end, but there does not appear to be a significant presence in the central or northern part of Robotyne. This would have been something that would be happening over the last month or so. not just today. So, but at least it's an update of what he believes are the front lines there. Now, from Shashank Joshi talking about this information here, Russia's offensive will stretch Ukraine all along the front with a main push in Donbass. Russia's aim is not to achieve a grand breakthrough, but to convince Ukraine that it can keep up an inexorable advance. A nibble, a nibble, a nibble, a nibble. Anywhere on the front line, anywhere that Russia is, there's tiny pieces just disappearing, being pulled off and taken by Russia. And to give that impression of that inexorable, the unstoppable, slow, gradual enveloping of Ukraine. That is what their plan is. And I'll be honest, a lot of people think that they're successful at that. Confirming information on Budanivka. That's all that is there. Now let's go into Kharkiv itself, where a lot of the action is going on. Russia's newly formed northern grouping of forces have attacked into Ukraine's Kharkiv region and taken control of several villages. The border town of Vovchansk is almost certainly an immediate Russian objective and is currently contested between Russian and Ukrainian forces. By opening up an additional axis of attack, Russia is almost certainly attempting to divert Ukrainian resources away from other parts of the front line and to threaten Kharkiv, the second largest city in Ukraine. It is unlikely that Russia has built up sufficient combat power to take the city without diverting additional forces into the area. This is the balancing part for Russia. If they have to put a credible force into play in Kharkiv in order for Ukraine to have to pull their resources from other parts of the front line. But if they commit too much to Kharkiv, it weakens Russia's other parts of the front line. So they're trying to balance this so that Ukraine has to act to counter, and Russia doesn't have to pull their resources from elsewhere to either sustain Kharkiv or pull them out of Kharkiv to help them with their operations elsewhere on the front. Or as the Institute for the Study of War states it, Russian forces continued to make tactically significant advances north and northeast of Kharkiv City on May 13th, and currently appear to be prioritizing the rapid establishment of a buffer zone along the international border over setting conditions for deeper penetrations into northern Kharkiv Oblast. They don't have the manpower or equipment to effectively penetrate much further into Kharkiv. They'd have to keep pouring more men in there, and they don't have any tanks or vehicles to speak of to carry that off. There is some reports that the Russians have destroyed several bridges across key waterways within the settlement of Vovchansk, which suggests that Russian forces are prioritizing the creation of a buffer zone. Again, if they eliminate those bridges, it results in they can't push further in, but neither can Ukraine push through to take that territory back. So interesting, very interesting, and could indicate some situations there. The Security Council Secretary for Ukraine reports that over 30,000 Russian troops are involved in the attack on Kharkiv Oblast. Initially, they reported 50,000. I don't know if this means that there was less than they expected, or if this is literally over 30,000, could include 50,000. I don't know. In Kharkiv, in the middle of a courtyard surrounded by residential buildings, a Russian missile landed but did not explode. Now, you see that red car back there? This red car was actually bumped up against this missile. You can see the damaged bumper and stuff like that. And they apparently rolled this unexploded ordnance around so it will actually be against the curb instead of propped up against that car. Somebody very luckily didn't get a Darwin Award. Heavy battles in Vovchansk as Russians are trying to establish a foothold in the northern outskirts of the city. It's ongoing. This is a constant battle right now. Residents are hiding in shelters in Vovchansk while waiting for evacuation, with the evacuations going on pretty much around the clock. Budanov, the enigmatic head of the Ukrainian GUR, has said that Ukrainian forces would be able to shore up their lines and stabilize the front within the next few days. We're starting to see some of that coming to pass. But he expects Russia to launch a new attack further north of Kharkiv into the Sumy region. Now, initially, they intended to enter Sumy at about the same time as they entered Kharkiv, but they had to abandon that plan due to the difficulties they were facing in Kharkiv itself. There is officially confirmed Russian presence inside of Ohrtseve, which I'm sure I butchered that pronunciation. They've got video confirmation of it right there, but they already expected that based on the other locations that have been already reported as being in Russian hands. Fighting towards Ternova was also reported, but no follow-up on that situation. This is Kharkiv. Several pictures of the sites of Russian missile attacks, showing that Kharkiv itself is not immune to the constant nature of this war. $6,700 people have been evacuated from the border settlements in the Kharkiv region, including 535 children and 128 people with limited mobility. This is Ukraine's priority, is getting their citizens out of the way. More from Budanov, stating that he says the situation in Kharkiv is not catastrophic, and there are indicators pointing towards stabilization. Indications that there's been real difficulty, though, for the soldiers in Kharkiv Oblast. Ukrainian troops, quote, changed positions near the village of Lukyantsy in Kharkiv Oblast to save the lives of their soldiers. The report is that they were coming under heavy, constant bombardment. Their positions were being destroyed, and they had to pull back and around to new positions to keep themselves from just being wiped out. Some pictures out of Vovchansk itself. You can see the situation is difficult. We'll put it that way. There are reports of street battles happening on the north end of Vovchansk at this point in time. Another video of Vovchansk, this time from a law enforcement vehicle. You can see buildings destroyed, streets with potholes and blast craters in them, houses with damage, etc. Now, there was a report that the Russians had taken a village by the name of Zeleny. Let me see if I can find that on the map. Zeleny, right here. And there was reports that the Russians had pushed to this point. However, in the last 24 hours, Ukrainian forces have counterattacked and pushed them clean out of Zeleny. Let's get back up to that spot on my list of things here. There's a lot of stuff about this. So the Ukrainian forces managed to knock them right back out. That indicates that they're able to effectively counterattack in these situations in the right places. And if that's the case, and it's continuing in that vein, that's bad news for Russia, because the Ukrainians at this point of this assault should not be able to effectively counterattack at all. But if they can, it means they're in better shape than Russia expected. Another video of Vovchansk, kind of get an idea of what things look like again. Smoke over the entire area there. It's rough. It is. And they're taking the brunt of it all right now. Other pictures of Kharkiv. They took 7 Russian strikes on the city back to back. And this is the circumstances they find themselves in. Residential buildings heavily damaged or destroyed, and more damage, and it's crazy stuff. Luciano, thank you for joining. Yeah, you're very late. I was late as well. I had a meeting today that took me just a little bit after, and I had to rush in. You can see I'm a little bit less dolled up than normal here. What can I say? It took forever to get my hair just like it is. Moving on, though, Franz Stefan Gotti, who is a modern and future warfare expert, stated that we are still in the shaping phase of a larger Russian push set to happen in the coming weeks, with two main objectives being to attrit Ukrainian manpower reserves by extending the active front line, and attrit air defenses to give Russians maneuver and space to interdict Ukrainian supplies. A number of Ukrainian ground lines of communication in Kharkiv, Donetsk, and possibly Sumy could come within range of Russian artillery in the coming weeks, complicating the deployment of reserves and the resupply of forces at the front line for Ukraine. A larger Russian push, however, does not mean a large-scale combined arms operation. Rather, what's more likely is smaller breaches done at platoon and company levels, a bite-and-hold approach, something we're seeing across all the front lines. And finally, this is the last bit off of the front lines. Russia occupied Lukyansk, north of Hlybok, and parts of Vovchansk. Fighting has gone going in the north and central parts. And this is where they also mentioned Ukraine regaining control of Zeleny. And those are the situations on the front lines. I got some interesting extras and a couple other things we're going to kind of go through and examine on the world stage. Let's go right into it. In the Bakhmut direction near Andriivka, a Russian over-armored tank was taken out, while also other destroyed equipment can be seen burning. This just shows that you can weld a whole bunch of plates over the top of your tank, but all you end up with is a blind tank. This would allow for any kind of main tank rounds. In fact, I saw one video of one of these being destroyed, and as far as I could tell, it was a direct hit from a main tank round. Not from artillery, not from a drone. The video just looked like the Ukrainians are just able to run a tank up there and get it within range, which is still like a mile to 2 miles away. So it's not like it's point blank range, but they can put it in there, and that the cage restricts the visual abilities of the T-72 underneath. Saw this one, disasters that are similar to this, but never quite so much in one place, but pretty darn close. And as far as the fun parts from Ukraine before we get into other world news, watch this one. That's a baby kangaroo that went into their garden and refused to leave. So they couldn't get him out, so he dressed up in a kangaroo outfit and encouraged the kangaroo to get into the pouch. Oh my God, that is so cute. That was absurdly cute. And that's everything about Ukraine. I've got a few other items that are related that you might want to stick around for, but otherwise you won't miss out on anything big if you don't. Some of it's going to be talking about China and some of it about Georgia. And so let's go ahead and get started on those right now. The Parliament of Georgia adopted the law on foreign agents. Now, I have to state this carefully here because I have a Fox News article that says they decided not to adopt this law and had given in to the demonstrators. But I've got this report that says they did adopt the law, and that has caused even more trouble. But the president of Georgia has promised to veto the law, but they expect the parliament to override. Now, before the voting took place, there was an actual brawl on the Georgian parliament between pro-Russian and pro-European members. This is obviously a contentious situation in more ways than one. And the situation outside the parliament has become rather grim, with the protesters blocking the entrance and the first clashes with the police having already been reported. This includes breaching the metal fence in front of Parliament, and the special forces have begun to detain individuals. And I'm going to give you a heads up warning in about this one here. This is one of the opposition leaders in Georgia who was beaten by their regime enforcers in Tbilisi. He was captured in broad daylight, as was documented in this video. Woof. Loud. It's rough in Georgia. This is what the Heroes Square in Tbilisi looked like. You can see thousands upon thousands of people flooding this area. And another view of the protests in Tbilisi. This is probably hundreds of thousands of people coming to express their desires for freedom. Republika Srpska has already moved ahead with the proposed foreign agents law that comes right out of Russia's playbook, which is why Ivana Straudner says we've got to help Georgia because this is the same playbook written by Russia for its proxies. Georgia now, who's next? 84 members of the Georgian parliament who voted for the Kremlin-inspired foreign influence law, but as Nana Sahaya states here, many had benefit from the perks of foreign funding themselves, be it a study scholarship or fellowship opportunities in Europe and the U.S. Power corrupts. And absolute power corrupts absolutely, as we have already seen. Like I said, here's the Fox News article that says that they caved. At this point, not absolutely certain, but I believe that this was just a ruse to try and get the crowds to disperse, and they went ahead and passed it anyway. Now, let's move on to China for a little bit here. And we mentioned China earlier in the video where we were talking about potentially China helping Russia to bypass sanctions. Well, Joe Biden has announced new tariffs on Chinese goods, including a 25% tariff on Chinese electric vehicle batteries and raw materials, semiconductors, some steel, aluminum, port cranes, and medical masks, a 102.5% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, and the goal is to limit the influx of Chinese goods, which are too low due to Chinese subsidies to their own manufacturers and the intervention of the Communist Party in the economy. China continues to work according to the old scheme to grow at the expense of others. They are investing in production despite excess capacity and flooding world markets with goods that are underpriced only by unfair competition. China is too big to continue playing by its own rules. Now, Now I'm going to delve into opinion for a little bit here. China has been undercutting the world for a long time now. I think there's been no question about that for a long time. So why now? Well, China's been getting buddy-buddy with Russia. China's been helping Russia to bypass sanctions. And one of the few ways that we can actually hurt China is by making it so their goods aren't worth buying in the United States, the largest market for Chinese-made goods. Now, the other perspective, and I've seen it all over the place, is this is effectively a tax on U.S. consumers because tariffs are not paid by the companies; they're paid by the companies in China. They're paid by the consumers here in order to get their imported goods. The question I have is, at what point in time is it worth the cost? At what point in time do you have to say that our own economy needs to be shored up when there is an uncompetitive, in fact, I would say anti-competitive person on the other end? I haven't come to a conclusion on that yet, but China is effectively declaring itself our enemy by supporting Russia. Russia has declared itself our enemy for a long time now. They have been at war with us, even though we haven't acknowledged this fact for a very long time. So we're starting to see the new battle lines. Not the ones where bullets fly, but the one where economies clash, head to head. This is the precursor to a shooting war. Russia's going to continue to threaten everybody with nuclear warfare. And the truth is that if they ever use it, it will be the end of Russia. But in the meantime, people kowtow to it. And by kowtowing to it, it emboldens China. It emboldens Iran. It emboldens North Korea. Everybody who doesn't have a nuclear weapon right now will start developing it immediately. Even those countries that have given up a nuclear weapons program, such as South Africa. Even ones who have sworn it off. This will be the new arms race. All because we couldn't face down the bully, knock him back, give him a black eye, and shove him right back into his corner. And that's everything for today. Thank you very much for joining me. I do appreciate you. I hope you understood today's everything going on today. I really went through a whole lot of stuff because there is so much going on that we have to address over time with each new update with Ukraine. I do appreciate you being here. Thank you again. If you enjoyed today's stream, hit me with that old thumbs up. Subscribe if you are not a subscriber, though I believe everybody here has already subscribed, and I do appreciate every one of you. You have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next video.